Cheers, guys. And welcome to Uncle Scott's Pancast. Today we're talking auto repair. No, today we are talking pans. Going to talk about some lodges, some lodge cast iron. Going to talk paella pans. I got an update on those OXOs and Mertens and Storcks. We've been talking about the last few pancasts. Maybe talk about Vollrath a little bit and more. Let's jump in and get started. First thing I want to talk about today is a deal I saw at Costco. Costco not a sponsor, Lodge not a sponsor, but they had these Lodge 11-inch cast iron skillets with the silicone handle protector for $19.99. I saw that and could not pass that up, and I jumped on it and bought one of those for myself. My wife got on to me a little bit. She said, "You've already got a bunch of Lodge pans. Why did you get another one?" And to her, I replied, if you got a 10-inch Lodge and need something a little bit bigger, and you got a 12-inch Lodge and need something a little smaller, where are you supposed to go? The 11, right? And I also let her know that I'm not into sports cars or anything terribly expensive. If a $20 frying pan makes me happy, let me be happy for 20 bucks. But anyway, Lodges, fantastic pans. I think every kitchen really needs a good Lodge or other cast iron, kind of one of the founding building blocks of any pan strategy in a kitchen. And for 20 bucks, ain't an absolutely screaming deal. So jump on that while they last if you have a Costco around. Next up, we've been talking about these Merten and Storcks and OXO carbon steel pans. And at least in my mind, they were a little bit controversial. And what I have decided to do, I started reviewing these things and they kind of perplexed me a little bit. Did some checking around and some people sent in some tips and hints on those. The surfaces of these pans, they're carbon steel, but they are not like what we're used to around here as far as traditional French style bare carbon steel. Lots of people told me they have a nitrided surface, and I didn't know what that was. I did some more checking into it. If it's not nitrided, I think the surfaces on these pans are something very similar. And there is a high temperature nitrogen process applied to these pans, and it kind of gives the pans a different type finish than some of the traditional smoother bare carbon steel pans we're used to around here. I also did some checking on Alibaba, and if they're not the exact same pans, there are some very similar pans made cheaply in China. If you buy 1,000 of them, you can get them for $4 to $6. And what I've come to realize here is that I'm just not interested in these cheaper kind of carbon steel nitrided pans. I'm not judging them one way or the other, but when I do a review around here, I do lots of cooking in the pans, and I started doing the cooking in these pans, and I just found that I was just not interested in them. So life is too short. I have to focus on things that make me happy, things that I'm really interested in. So I am washing my hands of the OXO and the Merten and Storck. I'm not going to do the review. And one thing I want to point out here, I hope it comes through in some of the pan reviews I do. I really do a lot of cooking in pans before I throw out an opinion in my reviews. There are some other sites, and I'm not going to name names or point fingers, but some other sites, when they do a pan review, it's almost like they take stock images from a manufacturer's website and regurgitate a bunch of the marketing statistics and call that a review. I can't ever tell some of these places if they've ever even touched the pans. Have they bought the pans? Have they done any cooking in the pans? I'm never quite sure on that. So when I do a review around here, I generally will cook at least 10 different things in a frying pan, and my wife doesn't believe in throwing out food, neither do I, and we eat everything we cook around here. So the prospect of cooking 20 meals that I didn't really want to do, just didn't want to do it. So I'm not going to review the Merten and Storck and the OXO. And some people might love them. I'm not taking any position on them whatsoever. And that is that. Something I do like talking about around here is paella. And we've been talking about paella recently. I put up a review of that Garcima paella burner and pan set. It came with this pan. This is a carbon steel 20-incher. And I also purchased a stainless steel 20-incher. So same size pan, also made by the same company, and it works well on that burner. Got a lot of feedback on that Paella burner and pan set review, so let's go through some of that. Let's see, Ryan B 107 wrote in, he asked what is the BTU output of that burner. I believe it's 38,800 BTUs. 38,000 BTUs on that Garcima burner. 1650 million wrote in and said, as a Spaniard, really good effort, congrats. That really makes me feel good with my paella. If an actual Spanish person writes in and says I did a good job, I like that. Tom Thalen, 8956, wrote in and said, in a cooking review, I should show myself tasting the food, kind of a taste test after all was said and done. I have mixed feelings on this. I don't like looking at people chewing with their mouths full, and maybe I can cover my mouth and do a taste test or something. I don't like watching people eat. Sorry. So I got to figure out how we're going to do that in cooking videos without driving some people crazy. Mr. Badger wrote in and asked what apron or smock I was wearing in that video. That is a custom one-off apron that my mother-in-law made for me for Christmas one year. So she got a pattern and actually did the sewing on that, and I'm 6'4" and a XL or 2XL depending on the time of year, and she made that one for me. Justin Heilmanart, not sure exactly how to pronounce that, wrote in and asked about the cleanup on that carbon steel paella pan. And I thought the cleanup was within a range for most carbon steel. And here I want to talk a little bit about the difference between the stainless and the carbon steel. The stainless, definitely a little bit less maintenance. As we know with carbon steel around here, it will rust if you leave it wet. So once I was done cooking the paella, once we were through eating, I made sure to clean it up relatively quickly thereafter. I didn't want any residual moisture from the rice to get any rust on the pan. So it cleaned up pretty easily. I can get this thing in a normal sized kitchen sink. I do have to rotate it just a little bit, but it's also important with the carbon steel, once you wash it, to dry it. So I dried it and I put it on a burner and made sure I got any residual moisture off. And then like any other carbon steel skillet, you need to add a little bit of protective oil. Did that so I don't get any damage or rust on the pan until the next time I use it. Now, there are always trade-offs. The carbon steel, there's more maintenance and you have to worry about rusting versus the stainless steel where you can, you don't have to maintain it. You don't have to rub it down with oil. It's a little bit easier to clean up and it's not as much of a, you don't have to do it quite as quickly after you eat. The differences here though are cost. The carbon steel is roughly 1/4 to 1/3 the cost of the stainless steel. The stainless steel pan, right around $150. So fairly steep there for a paella pan. They say the carbon steel might be a little bit more traditional, and that's probably due to cost. This is, after all, kind of a peasant or commoners type food, and I'm sure cost is a big issue over a wide number of people. So a little bit of difference there between the stainless and the carbon steel. Kim Pat Suhekigan, 583, wrote in and asked about when I was making that paella, where did the saffron go? They didn't see me putting any saffron in. Saffron, one of the pretty much crucial ingredients in any type of paella. I actually did use saffron. I had some stock going on the stove inside, heating that up because you don't want to add cold liquid to your rice or your paella. That will kind of stop the cooking. So I was warming that up and I went ahead and put the saffron in with that liquid with my stock. And so you didn't really see that, but it was definitely there. I will point out that doing a cooking video, especially paella, there are a lot of moving parts, and I had my in-laws running around. My mother-in-law was lurking about, and she could have stepped into that video at any moment, so had to save a few steps and get a few things done, perhaps more efficiently than I got to show in the video. Steaks E. Roger, a bunch of crazy screen names in this pancast, wrote in and asked about why we didn't season the carbon steel paella pan. And here I don't have a perfect answer. It's not going to stop me from throwing out an opinion anyway. When we season carbon steel frying pans around here, we kind of obsess over getting those things to have non-stick properties, kind of darkening in a pan and sliding things like eggs, getting them as non-stick as possible. The carbon steel paella pans are different, and for whatever reason, I'm not 100% sure, but we don't season those, we don't turn them dark. I followed the directions that came with the pan. And I think, and I'm not 100% sure about this, we always say to not use acidic ingredients in carbon steel frying pans. They will kind of strip some of the seasoning off. In the paella, I use fresh tomatoes. Those are acidic, and those will kind of strip seasoning off. I think because when you make paella, you do use acidic ingredients, there's almost no point in trying to develop a dark, thick seasoning layer that's going to get eaten off anyway. I read somewhere that some people kind of like the interaction with the tomatoes and the carbon steel pans, that maybe it adds a little bit of flavor to the paella. I'm not 100% sure about that. So there's acidic ingredients in there anyway. I think that would kind of prevent a lot of the seasoning from developing like we do with our carbon steel frying pans. And I haven't really seen anybody worry too much about seasoning on a paella pan. A little bit different than a carbon steel frying pan. Hellboy 700 wrote in and talked about using chicken thighs as a substitute for rabbit. After all, we made the Valencian paella. Traditionally, they will use a lot of rabbit in Spain in that paella. Tough to get rabbit around here, and he points out that you can get rabbit at Whole Foods and other places online. I did check into that, but a rabbit costs about 40 bucks. That's a lot of money to pay for a rodent, if you ask me. Not quite as interested in the rabbit just for me personally. I have eaten some over in Europe, but around here it's not really common, and you have to pay up as if you want it. It's kind of a specialty item. I guess you can get it, but as we say, paella is kind of a commoner or peasant food. If you start paying $40 just for one ingredient, all the other stuff is very expensive, the saffron. If you're not a peasant when you start making paella, you may be one when you're done. Judy Wilson 4004 wrote in about olive oil. I mentioned in the paella I used some Spanish olive oil. I think I said I had ordered it from Spain. It was imported from Spain, so a little bit of a language correction there, but definitely some Spanish olive oil. And she asked if I can tell the difference. I cannot tell the difference in country between one brand of olive oil to the next. When I spent a good deal of time in Italy, I had a buddy there that is a big time real deal Italian Tuscan foodie, and one day I asked him for some olive oil advice, and he said, hang on just a minute. Went into his storage room and brought out a bottle of olive oil that he had gone to the vineyard, to the olive grove when they were picking the olives, and had it first cold pressed right from the grove. That was the best stuff I've ever tasted, and I can definitely tell a difference between that fresh, real deal stuff and any other store-bought olive oil I have ever tasted. So I can tell a difference between good and store-bought, and good and bad, obviously. But as far as picking out which country something came from, I can't tell a difference. If you really want to worry yourself and panic a little bit about olive oil, read that book, Extra Virginity, and you might not ever trust any olive oil you buy ever again. One thing you also learn is that maybe an olive oil says it's from one country. Does that mean it was the olives were processed there? Was it just bottled there and they can put that country on the label because it may be in Italy or a Greece or someplace with a little bit of a reputation for olive oil, maybe a Spain. Lots of times olives will be grown in one country, shipped to another, and then processed and bottled there, and you can never quite tell 100% where things come from. So I look for reputable brands. Here in America, I do like California Olive Ranch. I like the 100% California. They have some worldwide blends that I tend to shy away from. I'm not sure exactly why, but if I'm paying for California Olive Ranch olive oil, I want it to be made in California. I don't want it to be from Argentina. And not to disparage Argentina or Portugal or Morocco or wherever these olives come from. I'm sure they're fine. It's just if it says California on the label and I'm paying for California, I want it to be from California. I also use some Italian stuff. I got some Spanish stuff. I took a trip to Spain one time and I had no idea there were so many olive trees in the entire world. Going across the countryside there, it was just like seeing wheat or corn in Kansas or Nebraska. There were olives from the road to the horizon in both directions. Had no idea so many olives existed in the entire world. So I like Spanish stuff. So as hard as it is to do, I try to stick to reputable labels and believe what's on them and stick to olives from California, Spain, Italy, maybe Greece. But as far as being able to tell the difference between country to country, that's very tough for me to do. Vollrath, I reviewed that Vollrath carbon steel skillet and I did not give it a thumbs up. I didn't particularly care for that skillet. Some people wrote in about Vollrath. I just want to say I am not down on Vollrath as a company. I did some checking into them. They seem like they have a very interesting background. I will probably review some more Vollrath products in the future. I just did not like that one particular carbon steel pan. So not down on Vollrath, just down on that one pan. And Hellboy also asked me if I've been losing weight. Yes, I have. And that's why today I'm not pouring anything terribly delicious, a little bit of hot tea. Today is a starvation day, or should I say intermittent fasting day. 2 days a week, I just don't eat anything, not 1 calorie, and the weight kind of burns right off. I'm down about 33 pounds in about 3 months. So it works. It's kind of annoying, but thank you to Hellboy for noticing. Cheers. And we'll see all of the rest of you guys next time on Uncle Scott's Pancast.